In session 4, we look at some practical tips on how to start and move conversations with the people that you're working to disciple. Jesus once told a lawyer that he should love his neighbor as himself. The lawyer asked Jesus to tell him just who his neighbor was. Jesus' answer became the famous story of the Good Samaritan. And in that story, Jesus illustrated how a neighbor becomes a friend. In NetWork, we want to make our neighbors friends and our friends disciples. The first step necessary to eliminate barriers between two people is to become friends. I know that sounds childishly simple, but that's the place to start. This whole disciple-making business begins by making a neighbor a friend. I remember as a boy during revivals and soul-winning seminars at our church, we were encouraged to compel people to come to church. The Lord was coming, the devil was angry, and the church was racing the rapture. We had to get as many people saved and inside the church building as possible. There was very little emphasis placed on establishing relationships with those people. It was just all about getting them to church. And we still need to get people to church. Nobody's house or live stream can provide what a good church service can. But the problem with the approach that I just described is that once the people we invited came to church, we were off the hook. Our job was finished. It was now up to the preachers and the pastor to make sure that these folks heard the gospel and got saved. We brought them to church. Our task was complete. But instead of trying to get your neighbor to come to church, NetWork is about taking the church to your neighbor. And you are the link that makes that happen. So the first essential step is to become a friend of the neighbor that you're trying to reach. Friendship begins with smiles and nods and simple greetings. And then it moves to, how are things going? And boy, your yard sure looks good. A good way to start a conversation with somebody you don't know well is just asking the question, when you aren't working or aren't busy at home, what do you like to do? Friend makers are observant people. They find ways to insert a kind deed or complimentary expression into their neighbor's life, like offering to collect their mail and packages while they're on vacation, or making a pie or taking some barbecue when you know they have family in to visit. You can send a note when their children excel in school or you see their name in the paper for some sporting event. So discipleship really does start with making a friend. You must deliberately and intentionally take action to insert yourself into your neighbor's life if you want to be their friend. Sometimes we think that's not very spiritual, but didn't Jesus say that giving a cup of water to someone was worthy of a reward? And didn't he say that when we fed the hungry or visited the prisoner or helped the poor, it was just as if we were doing that for him? And what better way is there to establish a friendly relationship with someone than helping them when they're really in need? So don't just feed the hungry or donate to the poor or have a Bible study in jail and then go home and think your Christian service is done. But instead, use each of those opportunities to establish a relationship with those that you're serving. The goal is not to just feed their bellies, but to eventually make them full-fledged, born-again members of God's church. While you're satisfying their physical hunger, deliberately create a spiritual hunger within them with your kindness and genuine love and concern. So, while you're doing these deeds of Christian service, keep your eyes open for any response from those you're helping that you can use as a gateway to establish a friendship. Now, sometimes our neighbors are wealthy and they don't seem to lack for anything. Yet, simple kindnesses will almost always be received with appreciation. Rich people enjoy good food and desserts as much as poor folks do. They like to see their children's successes celebrated and noticed. They're grateful when somebody reaches out to them without expecting something in return. Treat your rich neighbors the same way you treat your peers. Humans have the same needs and desires regardless of the price difference between their automobiles and their houses. Now, once you've established a relationship with someone, you will want to broaden their friendship to begin to include spiritual things. Now, just when you should do that will be different with every relationship you have. There are no hard and fast rules, so don't fret that you're moving too slowly. Just keep your eyes open, and when an opportunity presents itself, step through that open door. Sometimes your friend will open the door themselves by asking for prayer or asking questions about you or your church or what you believe. These opportunities are gold. Don't brush them off or get embarrassed and avoid the question and then hope that they never ask it again. But first, if they're asking you for prayer, they're inviting you to a place inside their heart that you can now visit any time from now on without another invitation. If they ask you to pray for a sick relative, for instance, you can pray immediately, but then you can call them the next day to check on their progress. And if weeks go by and that person recovers, you can continue to ask about them and ask if your friend has any other needs that they'd like you to pray about. You might even be able to invite them to a prayer meeting or to your home for prayer. But for a disciple maker, this is an invitation to get inside the soul of your friend. Don't treat it like a one-time event. See it as the open door it really is. Sometimes, though, we get uncomfortable when people ask questions about our church. Often it's our dress or lifestyle that they have questions about. Don't try to push the responsibility of your lifestyle decisions off on your church or pastor. When you do that, you're telling your neighbor that you simply follow religious practices instead of having a personal and vibrant relationship with God that's framed by His Word. But if someone asks a sincere question about why you do what you do, use that as an opportunity to discuss the Bible with them. You don't have to give them a 2-hour lesson on why ladies don't cut their hair, but you can use 1 Corinthians 11 as a gateway to discuss being born again. But what if you don't know all those scriptures and you aren't prepared to answer those kind of questions? Then just say something like, that's a decision I made after reading some things in the Bible and asking my parents and pastor to help me. I needed to understand it, and they did. I'll be happy to share my experience and show you why from the Bible when you have an hour or so that you can spare. How about this Thursday night? Can we meet then? By answering like that, you're letting them know that this is your relationship with God, and you are also buying some time to get your scriptures and thoughts together. Now, here is your first assignment for today. Task number 1. Right now is the time to think of the questions your friends might ask and prepare your answers now in advance. Knowledge is power. When you know that you have good answers to these questions, you won't be nearly as afraid to engage with your friends. But what if they don't ask for prayer or say anything about your church? Then when you feel the time's right, ask them questions and see how they answer. Jim, if you could change one thing about your life, what would it be? Or, hey Jim, what do you think is harder about life today than it was for your mom and dad? Many times, Jim's response will reveal something that he's concerned about regarding his family or his situation. And if you listen closely, it may provide an opportunity for you to agree to pray for him, or you might have a book on the subject that you could loan him, or maybe your pastor taught on that very subject a few weeks ago, and you can send him the link to the sermon. That leads to task number 2. Think of some scenarios that could occur with your friends and write down some questions that you would be comfortable asking them in a similar situation. Now, remember that every situation will be different. Some of your neighbors may jump right into spiritual discussions, but with others, it may take months before the time is right. Don't rush it. Just keep praying and allowing the Lord to let you know when it's time to take the next step. Sometimes life will make that decision for you. Your friend may suddenly lose his job, or one of their parents may require constant care. There could be a car accident, a friend's death, a new baby, a divorce, a marriage. You never know what life will bring next, but God does. So build a relationship, and when life demands a spiritual response, you'll be ready to move in. When your friend's going through a difficult time, let them know that you're praying for them. If you're unsure of how they might receive that, then just send them a nice card. Tell them in the card, praying for you. And when they acknowledge your card, look for cues that you can use to assure them that you will continue to pray for them and will be checking in periodically just to see how they're doing. Again, not a one-time prayer and done, but an open door until they intentionally and firmly close it. Now, while jumping straight into spiritual discussions the first time you meet someone isn't usually the smartest move, there are times when it's okay. For instance, when someone visits your church for the first time, you probably don't want to point out that they're a sinner and they'll be the first in hell unless they repent this very instant. However, it's probably okay at the end of the service while people are gathering around the front, if you go back to the guest and say, "Hello, I'm Doug. So glad you're here tonight. I'd be happy to pray about any need that you or your family or friends might have. And not just here and now, but I'll pray every day next week for your need." And then just see where that conversation goes. Don't be pushy or offensive, but a struggling person with personal or family issues may very well open up to a simple offer of prayer. Now, before you do this, do talk it over with your pastor, because many churches already have a system that's in place to minister to those guests. And you don't want to confuse the process or your guest. But say your friend is ready to talk about spiritual things. What do you do? Now, Bible study is a good next step. Bible study can take on many different forms. If you know your friend has specific questions or problems, you can create your own short studies that speak directly to that issue. Or if you don't feel comfortable with your knowledge of the Bible, you can look back and see if your pastor has preached or taught about those subjects. Find the link or download the message, and then you and your friend listen to it together. This way, you can see how they react to the teaching, and you can help if they have problems understanding certain parts, and then answer any questions that they may have. Your church may have even had a 3-week series on marriage or managing fear or some other topic that you know would help them. Do the same thing. Get your friend, meet them once a week, and go through the series together. Sometimes you can use Bible-related topics to introduce the idea of a Bible study to your friend who might be a little hesitant. For instance, there are several organizations that teach about financial management. Your friend may not be ready to study the Bible, but might be open or interested in hearing how he or she can get out of debt, even though it's taught from a biblical point of view. And then there are the Bible studies themselves. There are several options. Some are designed to introduce the plan of salvation in a 1-hour session. Then there are studies that take you through the entire Bible over a 3-month period. These studies usually come with teacher's guides and instructions that make them fairly simple to teach. Here's task number 3. Find out what Bible studies your pastor prefers. Often, pastors use a systematic approach to training and discipleship. Anything you can do personally that your church is doing corporately will make it easier for your friend when they become part of your church family. And that takes us to the final task, number 4. Determine which of these studies, the long one and the short one, that you're going to prepare to teach. Again, knowledge is power. By getting familiar with these studies before you need to teach them, you will reduce the fear and hesitation that you might have about disciple making. When it comes to teaching these Bible studies, don't let your worries and fears overwhelm you. You don't need to be a Bible scholar to lead people through these discussions, and they don't take hours of prep time to get ready. You can do this, and without a huge time commitment as well. And you've got help to fall back on. For instance, if your friend asks a question you don't know the answer to, you can always say, "I'm not sure about that. Let me check it out, and we'll discuss that one next week when we meet." Then you can get your pastor to help you find the correct answer from the Bible. These Bible studies are easy to learn as you go. You don't have to know all the answers before you start teaching. Don't let fear intimidate you before you get started. Remember, knowledge is power. If you'll complete the 4 tasks that we've given you in this lesson, the knowledge you gain will conquer the fear of being unqualified and unprepared, and your confidence will increase with each lesson that you teach. You just have to get started. You can do this. You were built for this. Turn your neighbors into friends and your friends into disciples in Jesus' name.